Oh, pull up a chair, honey. Get yourself a cup of tea. You've brought your old granny a video that really gets to the heart of the matter. I watched that little video you sent, all about that brilliant man, Charlie Munger. And bless his heart, he hit the nail right on the head. He talked about how people chase, and chase, and chase a number, but they never stop to ask themselves what enough really is. They get so busy building a life that looks rich, they forget to build one that feels rich. It's what he said about golden slavery that stuck with me. People earning more and more, only to buy more and more complications. A bigger house, a fancier car. And every single one of them becomes another link in a chain, shackling them to a job they hate, long past the day they dreamed of being free. It reminds me so much of two of my dearest, oldest friends. Two women I've known for nearly 50 years. Their story, well, it's the living, breathing truth of what that video was trying to teach. I want you to listen close, because this isn't just a story about numbers. It's a story about the choices we make, and how the quietest ones often have the loudest consequences. This is the story of Brenda and Margaret. Just last Tuesday, I was sitting at the chrome and glass counter of that new fancy department store cafe, the one with the little cookies that cost $8 apiece. And my friend Brenda called me. She was sobbing. Not a gentle little cry, mind you, but that ragged, gasping kind of sob that frightens you. Brenda, dear, what on earth is wrong? Is it Frank? Are the children all right? I heard her take a shaky breath. She was in her car. I could hear the thump 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 of her windshield wipers. I'm just sitting here, Eleanor, she choked out, in the parking lot at the new Whole Foods. I'm in my brand new car. The one Frank leased for me. And I'm looking at my list. And I just can't go in. What is it, honey? Did you lose your wallet? No, she whispered, and it was a whisper of pure, cold shame. I'm afraid the credit card won't go through. Now you have to understand. Brenda and Frank are what you'd call comfortable. Very comfortable. They live in a 4,000 square foot house in the new estates development. Frank just leased her that big white luxury SUV, the kind that looks like it could drive itself to the moon. And here she was, crying in a parking lot, afraid to buy groceries. She had everything she ever thought she wanted. And she was, in her own words from that phone call, the richest, most terrified, and most miserable woman she knew. She was trapped. A prisoner in a beautiful, mortgaged, leased, and high-interest cage of her own making. And the whole time I couldn't help but think of Margaret. Margaret, who was probably, at that very moment, sitting on a rickety folding chair in some national park, watching her husband David fly fish, without a single care in the world. Brenda and Margaret. They were like two peas in a pod when I first met them. This was back in the late 1970s. We all worked at St. Jude's Hospital. Brenda and Margaret were both charge nurses on the surgical floor. Lord, they were a sight. Sharp as tacks, compassionate, and they ran that floor like generals. Brenda was the spirited one. Always a new hairstyle, always laughing, always knew the latest gossip. She had a wonderful, warm energy that just drew people in. She married Frank, who was a hotshot young administrator at the hospital. Frank had ambition written all over him. He wore sharp suits, had a firm handshake, and always talked about scaling up and synergy before anyone even knew what those words meant. Margaret, now, she was my quiet one. She was just as smart as Brenda, maybe even more so, but she was steady. Like a deep river. She wore the same simple gold locket necklace every single day. She married David, who was the head of maintenance for the whole hospital campus. David was one of those men you just don't see much anymore. He could fix anything. Steam pipes, air conditioners, the big, scary generators. He wore a crisp blue work uniform, had grease under his fingernails that never quite came out, and whistled old Frank Sinatra tunes in the hallways. Back then they were in the same boat. Two young couples, two good hospital incomes, both saving up. Brenda and Frank bought a sweet little starter home, a 1,200 square foot brick ranch on the north side of town. A week later, Margaret and David bought one almost identical, just 2 streets over. I remember having them both over for spaghetti one night. Frank was talking about the 5-year plan for his first big promotion, and David was explaining how he just rewired their entire attic fan himself. Brenda was showing me a picture from a magazine of a kitchen with a big marble island, and Margaret was showing me a seed catalog, planning her first vegetable garden. They were standing on the exact same starting line. They had the same opportunities, the same steady paychecks, the same dreams of a good life and a comfortable retirement. But Brenda and Frank were looking at the magazine. Margaret and David were looking at the soil. And that, my dear, is where the paths split. The first big change came about 5 years in. Frank got his big promotion. Director of Operations. Came with a hefty raise, a new office, and, of course, a new title. I remember Brenda calling me, just squealing with excitement. "Ellie, you won't believe it. We're moving. Frank says that ranch house isn't director level. We found this gorgeous new build in the suburbs. It has a 2-story foyer and a 3-car garage." I was happy for her, I truly was. But I did ask, just gently, "My goodness, honey, that sounds like a palace. But what about that lovely little ranch? You've barely settled in." "Oh, pish," she said, laughing. "Frank says you gotta look the part to get ahead. Besides, we deserve it. We've worked so hard. We deserve it." Those 3 words, my child, are the most expensive words in the English language. They sold the ranch and moved into the big new house. It was beautiful, I'll give it that. But it was also empty. It needed new furniture to fill all those rooms. It needed expensive landscaping for the big yard. It came with a much bigger mortgage, higher property taxes, and a hefty HOA fee. And of course, Frank needed a new car to park in that new garage. A shiny dark blue sedan. He leased it. "It's a write-off, Ellie," he'd boom. "All part of the image." Around the same time, David got a promotion to head of facilities for the whole hospital network. It was a big, important job, and it came with a nice raise, just like Frank's. I waited for the "for sale" sign to go up in front of their little brick ranch. Never did. I had Margaret over for coffee, and I finally just had to ask, "Margaret, honey, I heard about David's new position. That's just wonderful. Aren't you two going to celebrate? Maybe look for a bigger place like Brenda and Frank?" Margaret just smiled, that calm, slow smile of hers, and stirred her coffee. "Oh goodness, no, Eleanor. Why would we do that? The roof is good, the furnace is new. And David just built a beautiful cold frame for my kale. We're perfectly happy. But what are you going to do with all that extra money from the raise?" "Well," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, "David and I sat down at the kitchen table. We figured we'd take one of those old pay-yourself-first envelopes. We're increasing our 401k contribution to the absolute maximum the government allows. Then we're taking the rest and making an extra principal payment on our mortgage every single month. Our plan is to have this little house paid off in 11 years. I just stared at her. Brenda and Frank had just signed up for a new 30-year mortgage. Margaret and David were planning to be debt-free before they were 45. But what about a new car? Prodded. Or a vacation? David's truck runs just fine, she said. And we're driving to the lake for a week in August, just like always. It's paid for. In cash. This was the pattern. For the next 30 years, this was the dance they did. When the kids came, Brenda and Frank's children had the best of everything. Designer strollers, private preschools, and the moment they turned 16, brand new cars in the driveway. "It's just what everyone does in our neighborhood, Ellie," Brenda would explain, a little defensively. "We don't want them to feel left out. The cost, of course, meant they had to pull back on their retirement savings. Just for a few years, Brenda promised, while the kids are so expensive. Margaret and David's kids. They got a bus pass and a part-time job. We told them, Margaret explained, that we will match, dollar for dollar, whatever they save for their first car. And we'll pay for half of their state college tuition. The other half they need to get scholarships for or work for. We want them to understand what a dollar is worth. Brenda heard that and just shuddered. My goodness, that sounds so harsh, she told me over lunch. Then came the stock market fads. Frank, being an executive, was always chasing the next hot tip. He got into tech stocks in the late 90s. It's a new paradigm, Ellie. You don't understand. These companies are changing the world. He made a killing on paper. And then he lost nearly all of it in the crash of 2000. He was devastated, and quietly had to take a home equity loan on the big, beautiful house to cover their credit card debt. David. I asked him about his portfolio at a hospital barbecue. He just laughed. Portfolio. Eleanor, I'm a maintenance man, not a Rockefeller. I just buy that one total market index fund in my 401k every 2 weeks, no matter what the news says. And I reinvest all the dividends. I don't even look at it. It's boring, I suppose. It's like that quote from Warren Buffett. The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. Frank was all impatience. David was a stone statue. There was no single dramatic decision for Brenda and Frank. It was 1,000 tiny ones. It was a slow, seductive slide. It was the decision to say yes to the country club membership, because all of Frank's colleagues are members. It was the decision to remodel their dated 10-year-old kitchen, spending $80,000 they didn't have, because it adds to the resale value. It was the decision to always lease the newest, shiniest cars, because Frank has an image to maintain. With every yes, the cost of their life went up. Their break-even number, the sheer amount of money they needed every month just to stay afloat, crept higher and higher. It went from $3,000 a month to $5,000, then $9,000, then $12,000. Brenda wasn't a fool. She was a smart woman. She would tell me in quiet moments that she felt like she was on a treadmill. I feel like we're running as fast as we can, Ellie, just to stay in the same place. We make more money than we ever dreamed of, but I look at our savings, and I just get this cold, sick feeling. Where is it all going? Where is it going, honey? Ask. And she'd sigh, looking at her expensive manicured nails. Well, the mortgage, and the country club dues, and the kids' college loans we co-signed. And Frank just likes nice things. He says we've earned it. We deserve it. There were those words again. Margaret and David's decision was the opposite. It was 1,000 tiny no's. No, they told their friends. We can't go to Aruba this year, but we'd love to have you over for a barbecue. No, David told the car salesman. I don't need the heated seats or the sunroof. I'll take the base model. In cash. No, Margaret told herself, walking through that same fancy department store. I don't need a $500 handbag. My old one holds my keys just fine. Every no wasn't a deprivation. It was a purchase. They weren't just not spending money. They were buying something far more valuable. They were buying their freedom. They paid off their little brick ranch in 11 years, just as they planned. They kept right on making that house payment, only now it went straight into a brokerage account. They drove their cars for 15 years apiece. They became millionaires on paper before they were 55, not by being brilliant, but simply by, as Charlie Munger would say, avoiding idiocy. They lived on about 50% of their income and saved the rest. It was boring. It was simple. And it was revolutionary. Retirement day finally came. Frank threw a huge party for himself at the hospital. There were speeches, a big ice sculpture, and catered food that must have cost a fortune. He was 65. Brenda had retired a few years earlier to manage the house. About 6 months later, I ran into Brenda at the grocery store. She looked frazzled. "Brenda, how is retirement treating you? How is Frank enjoying his freedom?" She gave me a tight, brittle smile. "Oh, it's an adjustment. To be honest, Ellie, he's driving me crazy. He's bored. But what about that trip to Europe you were always planning?" Brenda's face fell just for a second. "Well, we've had to put that off." Frank ran the numbers and, well, turns out this house and the club and the cars, it's all just a lot more than we thought. "What do you mean, honey?" "I mean," she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp, "he's taking on some consulting work, just to stay busy, he says. But I saw the bank statement, Ellie. We need him to. Our savings. After we paid off the kids' last student loan. It's just not what we thought it would be. And Social Security doesn't even cover the property taxes on this place." She was 65. He was 65. They had a beautiful home, 2 fancy cars, and a country club membership. And they were, for all intents and purposes, broke. They were shackled to that big, beautiful house. They couldn't afford to sell it because where would they go? They had no next step. They had built a life that required a $200,000 a year income, and now they had to live on $70,000. The math, as Mr. Munger says, is arithmetic. It doesn't care about your feelings or your image. That's when she told me, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The worst part, Ellie, the absolute worst part, is that Frank knows it. He knows he failed. And he's so angry all the time." That brings me back to that phone call last week. Her crying in the parking lot, afraid her card would be declined. Frank had taken on more consulting, but he was also spending more, trying to look like he was still a big shot. They were drowning. She was a prisoner of the lifestyle they had built, one "I deserve it" at a time. Margaret and David. They retired the second David turned 62. There was no party, no ice sculpture. He just didn't come into work one Monday. They sold the little brick ranch. After 40 years it was paid for, and the neighborhood had become popular. They got a wonderful nest egg from it. And they vanished. About a month later I got a postcard. It was a picture of a big, beautiful mountain. On the back, in Margaret's neat cursive, it said, "Dear Eleanor, we did it. We sold the house and bought a used Airstream trailer. We're seeing the country just like we always dreamed. David is fishing every single day. We've got our Social Security, and our nest egg is more than enough. We don't need much. The views are free. Love, Margaret and David." They had done it. They had their enough. It wasn't $10 million. It was a paid-off trailer, a fishing rod, and their time. They owned their days. They were beholden to no one. They were, in every way that truly matters, the richest people I have ever known. Now you listen to me, child. I didn't tell you this story to make you sad for Brenda or to tell you that you can't have nice things. That's not the point. The point is about consciousness. Brenda and Frank were just asleep. They let the world, the commercials, and their neighbors write their life story. Margaret and David. They picked up the pen and wrote it themselves. That video you sent me. That man Munger. He said, "If you can wake up when you want, work with people you respect, and say no to nonsense, you've won the game." Margaret and David won the game. Brenda and Frank are still playing and they don't even know the rules. So here is your granny's lesson. I want you to take this to heart. Define your enough and write it down. The most dangerous thing in the world is a vague desire for more. More is a finish line that moves. I want you to sit at your kitchen table, not in a fancy office, at your kitchen table, and write down what enough looks like. Is it a paid-off house? Is it $40,000 a year from your investments? Is it the freedom to garden and see your grandkids? Be specific. A goal you can't measure is just a wish. Name the thief. Lifestyle inflation. The video was right. It's a disease. The moment you get a raise, your first thought shouldn't be, what can I buy? It should be, how much of this can I save? Treat every raise as a gift to your future self, not your current ego. As an old friend of mine used to say, don't raise your standard of living. Raise your standard of saving. Behavior is your only true weapon. You don't need to be a Wall Street genius. You just need to not be a fool. David wasn't a stock-picking wizard. He was just consistent. He was a tortoise. He bought his boring fund every 2 weeks, in good markets and bad, and he never stopped. He let compounding, that eighth wonder of the world, do the heavy lifting. Brenda and Frank were the hares. Always sprinting, always chasing, always getting distracted. And they'll never finish the race. True wealth is autonomy. What did Margaret and David buy with all those no's? They bought their mornings. They bought their time. They bought the right to wake up and say, what do we want to do today? Not what does the boss, or the bank, or the credit card company need us to do today. Freedom isn't a $1 million yacht. Freedom is a paid-for cup of coffee in a paid-for home, with a day that belongs to you. Don't be a Brenda. Don't wake up at 67, crying in a luxury car you can't afford, trapped by an image you no longer even want. Be a Margaret. Live in your little brick ranch. Plant your garden. Pay off your debts. Save your money patiently and boringly. And then one day you'll pick up a pen, write a postcard from someplace beautiful, and you'll realize you're free. That, my dear, is the only kind of rich that matters.